So ever since I discovered that Angular ships with a format date function, I started to write a few posts on how I could use that and write some additional functionality to round out the date time functionality that I might have in an external date library. And I wanted this post to be kind of a aggregation of all the previous posts to show you how I can actually, I believe, replace all of my external date libraries with just about 300 lines of code, comments included. Now, I will caveat to say that one thing that a library author needs to do is consider all of the edge cases and make their libraries typically as flexible and as robust as possible, because they don't own the applications in which their libraries are going to be consumed. But since I am writing the Angular applications that are presenting the datetime functionality, I don't have to be nearly as flexible or robust as a library author has to be, because I can make certain assumptions about how that datetime functionality is going to be expressed within the application, which is probably why my 300 lines of code don't do everything that the external libraries do, because I simply don't need them to do everything the external libraries do. With that said, I just wanted to demonstrate this. This should look familiar. This is basically the same UI for my previous demos. I have a date time, which I can adjust with these, and a relative time, but what you'll see is that now as I adjust things, we get some additional logging here, and this is just to showcase some of the additional functionality. So we have our date and our relative date. That's what these two are up here. I'm also doing diffing and the days in the month. And of course, this date is being done via the add, and then it's being outputted via the format. But let's just refresh here. And what we can see is that if I go -1 here, our date diff is 0 years, 1 month, 31 days, 745 hours, and then this becomes minutes, seconds, and milliseconds, and we can see the days in that month are 31. Now we can go down to February of 2020, and we can see that the days in the month there are 29 because it's a leap year. But if we go back to the previous February, we can see that the days in the month there are 28. So you can see we have some additional functionality. Let's take a look at how this is being implemented. So here is my date helper class, and this is basically the same class except now coalescing the previous demos. We have our add, which allows us to add parts to a date. For example, I can add years, month, dates, so on and so forth, and this just leans on the native functionality of the JavaScript date object. We have our days and month, which again is just leaning on the native JavaScript date object to go up a year, subtract a day, and then get the number of days in that particular month. We have our diff. The diff is using some rough estimations. Again, here's the difference between a library requirement and a class requirement within an application that I own. I can, for example, decide that the year, month, and day deltas can be rough estimates based on milliseconds, because after all, we're math.flooring all these things. We're going to have rounding errors. I'm not building the application where a slight incorrect month delta is actually going to cause a problem and probably won't even ever be noticed by the user. So again, because I own the application, I can make assumptions that a library author cannot make. We have the format function, which of course just leans on the format date function that ships with Angular, and this is basically 50% of all the magic in this entire class. I have my version of from now, which is based on Moment.js's from now, which we saw in some previous posts. It's basically just finding the delta between two values in milliseconds, and then it's bucketing those milliseconds into some human-friendly output. And that's it. That's the entire date helper class. And again, I feel like that really covers, 99+% of all of the requirements that I have around date times in my Angular applications, which is why I think I can now eliminate any external date libraries. But depending on your application, your mileage may vary. Depending on some of the needs for accuracy, your mileage may vary. But anyway, I think I'm pretty excited about this, because if I can remove an external library, it means I can decrease my bundle size, which means I should be able to decrease the load times for my application and overall improve the user experience. So I'm excited.